Hello, horrorphiles. You're listening to Dissecting Horror,
examining the anatomy of fear in film, television, and literature.
in our society of grotesquerie and loathing, if you will.
I will, and we hope you will subscribe for more, won't you? The selfishly evil vampire Lestat seduces Louis into a life of immortality, where he is troubled by the need to kill to maintain his own life. He confesses his 200-year erotic and bloody adventure to an unbelieving journalist, according to the random Amazon Blu-ray product description. Released 30 years ago on November 11th, 1994, the full title of this film is actually Interview with the Vampire, The Vampire Chronicles. Produced under David Geffen and based on the Anne Rice novel, this feature was brilliantly directed by Neil Jordan.
I wouldn't say I love it, but this viewing allowed me to walk away with a bit more appreciation for it. While what left a bad taste in my mouth initially still had that effect. Largely, the over-the-top emotional outbursts and bickering, melodrama, and exaggerated style still pulled me out of the story at moments. However, these moments didn't encompass nearly as much of the running time as I remembered.
Louis, the actual vampire being interviewed, is played by Brad Pitt, who turned in here an understated and soulful performance, which is the exact opposite of what you just said, isn't it? Understated. He's more over the top. I felt he was more apathetic for most of it, and his voice during the voiceovers especially were rather sad. I never actually seen nor heard of Brad Pitt prior to this film and consider it his breakout role. River Phoenix, older brother to Academy Award-winning actor Joaquin Phoenix, was originally cast as Daniel Malloy, the interviewer. Phoenix, however, died 4 weeks before he was to begin filming. At age 23, Phoenix overdosed on a mixture of cocaine and heroin, commonly known as a speedball, at the Viper Room nightclub in West Hollywood in the early hours of Halloween 1993. Phoenix was recast with Christian Slater, who donated his entire salary to Phoenix's favorite charities.
The real standout among the cast was a young Kirsten Dunst capturing the complex mental state of a mature supernatural force stuck in a child's body. She showcases her hunger and often brutal, unfeeling nature with her victims, and sometimes even with Louis, not having the same capacity for feeling as he does, while still yearning for a deeper understanding, companionship, and sense of self. At moments, she reads as a child, from the innocent and fearful to the temper tantrums of rage and misunderstanding. At other moments, even at 11 years old, she portrays someone far more mature, calculating, formidable, and tormented.
According to her biography, Anne Rice wrote the novel soon after the death of her 6-year-old daughter Michelle, who served as an inspiration for the child vampire character Claudia. Played by Kirsten Dunst, she was 11 at the time, if my math is correct, and gives one of the most astonishing child performances I have ever seen. She is sympathetic, yet sadistic, innocent, yet intimidating. I found each casting choice and performance in this film impeccable. Christian Slater, however, was the one that felt most out of place for me. He was such a contrast to the rest of the characters and cast, and I'm sure intentionally so, being representative of a different age. Still, Slater isn't one of those actors who exactly disappears into his character. When I see him, I just see Christian Slater, not the character he's playing. Although you could say the same thing about a lot of great actors like Jack Nicholson, Clint Eastwood, or Sean Connery. Although likable and distinctive enough, Slater to me does not possess sufficient depth or presence to stand toe-to-toe with Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, or the rest of the cast. The most chilling character to me was Santiago, played by Stephen Ray. By the way, my name is also Stephen Ray, with Ray being my middle name, although his is spelled R-A-E, not R-A-Y.
It's so interesting, our thoughts on this. I think Santiago was my biggest issue with the film, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that guy gives me the creeps. In a good way.
For me, the biggest offender of the cringy, over-the-top depiction is in the Theater de Vampires, and especially the head-exaggerated showman Santiago. It was pretty impossible for me to take his character seriously at all. From the first moment we see him, to his lingering suspicions of Louis, and as things escalate, I couldn't accept him as a dangerous foe. He's a key part of the escalating climax, so that was a problem. The face-off revenge scenes lose their intensity. The dramatic, loud-in-your-face music, and especially Santiago being so cheesy, with exaggerated movements, detracted from the tense moment. He is a theatrical vampire, used to performing and getting gasps and laughs, so I get it. But he didn't read as nearly this much of an over-the-top joke in the novel.
He came across as so sleazy to me that I hated him, but he's a character that I love to hate. He had such a shit-eating grin. He acted invincible and untouchable, and he had all these other people behind him, and you just wanted to just wring his neck so bad, but you know that he was safe. He was just so purely evil with no redeeming qualities to him that I think contrasted well with Louis, and they made for a great dynamic there between their characters, and it was so satisfying to see that fucker be confronted towards the end. But there's that old point which is frustrating and fascinating at the same time, how two people can look at the same thing and one person feels completely opposite to the other, and how unpredictable that can be as an artist trying to convey something consistently amongst their audience, and how it's a coin toss.
Yeah, and I think from your perspective, that adds some depth that like I didn't really see in the character, and definitely the contrast. You're right; they're pretty much like exact opposites for his solemn and serious and moral and feeling to, you know. Yeah, I think it was really just the whole theater troupe as who had this just intensely over the top sort of quality to them, where it seemed almost more like a joke, where it actually took the intensity and any terror sort of out of it for me. It was just a little bit too comical, exaggerated, over the top, and he was just the worst offender. Where I don't know, I didn't really feel like I got much of a sense of like who he was as a vampire aside from just being like a foe to Louis.
I think there was an intention to instill those theater vampires as being rather shallow and decadent and pointless and needing to just be done away with as part of the story. And maybe they pushed that a little bit too hard to the point of pushing you away. I didn't need to know too much about them besides the fact that I'm not supposed to like them, and I didn't, but I still appreciated their grandeur and the whole theatricality of their characters as a justification for their melodramatic poise and attitudes throughout. So I found that interesting. It was a contrast. It was more like a European or French sort of behavior versus the New World, and I thought that worked well for me.
Yeah.
But, that's fine. You're wrong and I'm right. That's
It is really those so over the top it's comical moments that had me cringing and begging for a little artistic subtlety. It's a bit much and does take me out of it, or saying to myself, here we go again. But I also understand it's consistent with the material and characters' dynamic with one another. I don't particularly love Brad Pitt as Louis or Tom Cruise as Lestat. Yes, at moments, it's the level of melodrama, but I think it's really more of a casting thing than what they individually brought to the table or could have done differently. They aren't bad, but there are also some actors that so perfectly capture and bring to life characters, honoring them and bringing out all of their complexities, while also bringing an energy and unique understanding that allows for a sort of evolution and one-of-a-kind portrayal. And I wouldn't say either Cruise or Pitt reach anything close to that territory for me personally. I will say Cruise did well with the material he was given. He largely encompassed the manic range of Lestat, from the toying, devious, and sensual brat prince to the controlling, rage-filled puppeteer. I'm sure it was the direction he was given, but the frequent outbursts and overacting at times just keep me from really loving the performance. In moments, Pitt seems to carry the weight of Louis' dilemmas and plaguing guilt, but at other moments he feels far too one-note. When he isn't having a particularly emotional reflection, his acting is a bit robotic and stilted, particularly noticeable when he first introduces himself to the interviewer. This is clearly a creative choice, a cold, removed being, which makes sense, but a far cry from representing the complex enigma the vampire represents.
Tom Cruise revels in the theatricality and dark humor of his character Lestat. I actually first saw this film in the theater, and it was one of those handful of experiences that stand out where the audience just wanted to like someone so much, and were so enthusiastic about every slightest gesture he made. They were eating it all up and just could not get enough of him. On the DVD special features interview, Anne Rice gushed profusely about the film and performance by Cruise, yet his initial casting as Lestat was famously criticized by Rice, who said in a Movie Line article published in 1994 that it was, quote, "so bizarre, it's almost impossible to imagine how it's going to work. I have one question. Does Tom Cruise have any idea of what he's getting into? I'm not sure he does. I do think Tom Cruise is a fine actor, but you have to know what you can do and what you can't do," unquote. She recommended other preferred actors, including John Malkovich, Peter Weller, who played RoboCop, Jeremy Irons, and Alexander Godunov, the blonde villain in Die Hard. She also suggested that Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise switch, stating, quote, "I tried for a long time to tell them that they should just reverse these roles, have Brad Pitt play Lestat, and have Tom Cruise play Louis. Of course, they don't listen to me," unquote. After seeing the finished film, Rice said, quote, "The charm, the humor, and the invincible innocence which I cherish in my beloved hero Lestat are all alive in Tom Cruise's courageous performance. That Tom did make Lestat work was something I could not see in a crystal ball," unquote. She later called Cruise to compliment him and went so far as to take out a 2-page ad in Daily Variety declaring, quote, "From the moment he appeared, Tom was Lestat for me. He has the immense physical and moral presence. He was defiant and yet never without conscience. He was beautiful beyond description, yet compelled to do cruel things. The sheer beauty of Tom was dazzling, but the polish of his acting, his flawless plunge into the Lestat persona, his ability to speak rather boldly poetic lines, and speak them with seeming ease and conviction were exhilarating and uplifting. The guy is great," unquote.
Well, I definitely had things I don't like and my own preferences of where I saw more compelling potential. I imagine this was largely what she had envisioned, perhaps with making a few concessions. I can put largely aside my own preferences and simply take in and have some respect for an artist's story and intent.
Published on April 12, 1976, Interview with the Vampire was the debut novel of Anne Rice, based on a short story written around 1968. The later screenplay was also written by Anne Rice, a not-so-common occurrence. The makeup and practical effects were produced under Stan Winston Studios, who pioneered the landmark effects of Jurassic Park a year prior, which, like Interview with the Vampire, still holds up shockingly well. One might argue they look even better than much of what is produced today, since technological restrictions of the time forced a limited use of computer-generated imagery, which was then mixed with more practical elements. The focus on Interview with the Vampire was to make any effects as invisible as possible, delegating them mostly to set extensions. This was indeed one of the last big-budget vampire films produced without heavy CGI. I also have to say this film was not afraid of using real fire, and lots of it, in lighting its sets and half its stunt people ablaze. And everyone could not be wearing more ignitable, flammable costumes as well. I kept expecting each actor's robes or poofy sleeves to go alight at any moment from the vicinity of candles alone.
I also really enjoyed the look of the vampires itself here, more on a makeup aspect. They had intense, slightly unnatural, vivid eyes that command and look otherworldly, pale, translucent skin highlighted by veins, and slightly gaunt jawlines, hinting at the undead nature without being over the top. They bridge between being a show of the human selves and something frozen in time, powerful and perceptive, but haunted all the same.
Much of the rich atmosphere comes from the exquisite Elliot Goldenthal score, easily in my top 5 horror scores, if not my number 1. This film contains everything I could hope for in a horror film, including the highest production value one rarely sees in this genre, a near masterpiece. Not just of horror, but of filmmaking in general, and for me, only gets better with time. Definitely in my top 5 favorite horror films, this is exactly up my alley. Atmospheric, humorous, epic, classy, yet macabre and demented, with an elegance and beauty at the same time. It showcases fully fleshed out three-dimensional characters and dialogue penned by a legendary writer, superbly performed, and filmed with an exquisite dark grandeur. We perceive here that we are in the capable hands of artists who recognize what really matters in a film, and have the security and confidence to know that it will work, and it does. Contrast this with your 2004 Van Helsing or The Haunting 1999, whose insecurities lean them harder into excessive CGI, Stunts, explosions, and overacting in the futile hopes of compensating for the lack of impactful storytelling through spoken words alone. Which is exactly the opposite of everything she just said, but...
Yes, I'm a little surprised that you love this film that much, but also knowing that you like the elegant sort of mansion with the creepy past and haunting ghosts. I guess it kind of is in line with that.
Due to his star power, Cruise received a then-record $10 million salary and a percentage of the profits. On Rotten Tomatoes, this film holds a 63% critic score and 86% audience score. It earned well over $223 million against a $60 million budget at the box office alone. As a final note, a common misconception is that it's called Interview with a Vampire, rather than Interview with the Vampire, to the point of being considered a Mandela effect. This stems from the words with and the merging together, so Interview with the Vampire sounds almost exactly the same as Interview with a Vampire. So there you go.
If you enjoyed this deep cut, you'll love the podcast in full.
If you would like to join our society of grotesquerie and loathing, subscribe now and give this podcast a like.
And be sure to comment your wretched thoughts below.
Keep our podcast suffering on by finding it in your cold, black, withered hearts to support us on Patreon.
A link to our PayPal is also below for one-time donations of any amount.
It was nice knowing you.